So this is kind of a joint talk with Rasmus. He's standing over here now. He's a test frameworks lead on the test cloud team at Xamarin. And I'm an engineering lead at the same team. We actually work here in Aarhus. Our team is, as you said in the beginning, we are 200 meters over here in the Incuba Science Building. And we run the entire test cloud, all the test cloud labs from there. So we are going to have multiple data centers that are not in Denmark, but right now everything's here, very close to you. So we could walk over there after the event and have some fun. Yeah, so I'm going to give you a fairly short general overview of what Xamarin Test Cloud is and the associated tools that you can use to write tests. And then we'll do the fun stuff, which is to actually see it. And Rasmus will do the fun stuff. I get to do the boring stuff. But I think it's not so boring, actually. I hope you'll agree. But I'd like to start by having everyone raise their hands, please. All right, keep your hands up, except for me. If you're not involved in a mobile project, it's okay, you can put your hand down, which is actually surprisingly many. All right, I'm going to ask some questions, and you're maybe involved, or you have a heavy elbow. So keep your hand up if you can say yes to the following statement. Otherwise, just kind of slowly take your hand down. All right. So we have automated building our app, and we have that automation running in a CI server. So we lose about 50% of people. All right, it goes on. We run unit tests and maybe or integration tests. A few more people, kind of. We run end-to-end or UI tests every day or in every commit. 4 people, 3 people, kind of. All right, let's see how far you can go. So every time we build a new feature, we develop a test for it in conjunction with building that or specification. That's just part of the development cycle. Are you guys all on the same team? I know one of you. We almost never find bugs in manual testing. Wow, 3 people up. Usually that's just where people really go down. And we can release at any time with confidence. Even if we didn't anticipate having to release. So if there's suddenly a business requirement that we have to ship now because there was this change to iOS which broke something, then we don't go, yeah, we can fit that in 3 weeks after we complete the sprint and the code base is stable and if we've tested it. No, we can branch off and release and satisfy that business requirement. So 3 people up, that's the best I've ever had. Usually everyone's down here, which is kind of interesting because if you compare it to the way you develop maybe mobile or server applications, like the level of maturity is really high. So a lot of people have this stuff running if you're building some kind of web service or website. I think it's natural in the sense that mobile is really new. And so you have to learn all these technologies like Objective-C and Java, or if you're using Xamarin, you have to you probably already know C#, but you have to learn still mobile technologies to some degree. And there's a lot of stuff to learn. How many APIs was it, Mike?
33,000 for iOS, 40 for Android.
So 73,000 APIs. Of course, you don't have to learn all of them, but it gives you a feeling of the magnitude of that. So there's a lot to learn. And if you have to also establish all these practices and learn the testing tools, there's just a lot. So I think it's natural. It's early. And we will mature. But I think there is value in going in this direction. We had a survey that we did, and we asked people, so how are you testing your apps? And most came back with almost exclusively manual testing. In fact, we had a story with one customer that we asked, so how do you do testing? And they said, well, it's pretty easy. We just write these Word documents that describe all the test cases. And then once we were ready to test an iteration, well, we ship all those Word documents to a separate company. We outsource the testing to a separate company, and then we wait 21 days, and then we get the results back in another set of Word documents, which have screenshots embedded in them, we print all those out and lay them out on the table, and we look at them, and we figure out whether the code 21 days ago had any bugs in it. But of course, that's not very good, because what happens in 21 days? Well, a lot of stuff happens in 21 days. So you don't want to go there, but still, it seems a lot of people are there. The good news is that it's possible. And in fact, instead of me telling you it's possible, I want to bring forth a case study, which is the guy which actually had his hand up a few minutes ago, which is here in Denmark, and I've worked with them for a long time. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll say a few statements about how you guys work. And having you here keeps me honest, so I don't oversell. So you have these two apps for iOS. I just heard today that actually Mjølner, the company here, is working on the Android version of that, if I understood correctly. So I don't have that information in the slide. But it's quite popular here in Denmark. I'm sure that at least 25 people in here probably have the app on their mobile devices, because it's a quarter of the Danish population. Maybe it doesn't match the demographic of the people here, but anyway, it's a lot of people. Popular apps. The way they work is, maybe it's easier if you tell them. How do you guys work? What's your team composition?
Not too good actually, so.
Oh, your voice is not great. Okay, you can shout if I'm lying. So they run a small cross-functional team in the sense that they have development, testing, and management integrated in one team. Instead of having a siloed approach where you have development, then they ship the code over to the testers, they do some testing, and then they send the results back in some form. This is integrated. They work using BDD, behavior-driven development, which is a startup development. I don't want to go into that in this talk. You can talk to Niels or me about it. But it's kind of an approach which ensures that you're always writing specifications of the features that you're building, and that those are executed, or possible to execute them as automated tests for every feature you're building. And that those tests are understandable by the business as well as the developers and testers. So when they pick out a new story, they work together, 1 or 2 developers, and they implement with the feature, they implement the unit test and the testers in that, describing when is this done, when is it done, when is this feature done, and help phrasing what the requirements are. And that's part of just the development. You're not done until that test is done and the tester is happy. And that involves unit tests, integration tests, and UI tests. Then they have a CI setup with a couple of Mac Minis that run the iOS simulator that you saw before, and execute these tests on every commit. The technology is called Calabash. I'll get back to that in a moment. So they run these tests, the UI test specifically, on every commit, and then they run a subset of these tests in the product that I'm working on, which is called Xamarin Test Cloud. I'll show you, or Rasmus will show you, I'll talk a bit about it. But that's able to execute these tests on real hardware, on the real devices that your users are using out there in the wild, and get the results back. And then finally, the full suite is run once every night. Is that still true?
Yes, yes.
It's still true, great. Actually, Niels just did a talk at Go to Copenhagen about this, that I hope they'll publish the video, so you can hear it from him instead of me. All right, so I hope that I've convinced you that it's possible to get there, at least by example, and I hope you believe that there's value there. But let's talk very briefly about, so how can we help at Xamarin? You can think of our philosophy as kind of 3 things: a strong focus on automation. We believe you should be automating from the very beginning of the project. Get your builds automated, start writing unit tests, integration tests, and UI tests, and try to do it from the beginning of the project. That way you maximize the value you get out of the tests, and you get really good at writing tests from the beginning. And it becomes part of your culture. That's the way to maximize the value of the tests. This doesn't mean you won't be doing manual testing. I don't think we will ever get to a stage where we're not doing manual testing, because humans can do some things that machines have a really hard time doing, which is to evaluate, say, the user experience or the smoothness of an animation. But it's also doing like really creative, weird stuff with your application that you didn't expect. I think the example that Niels uses sometimes is the 8 wires triple rotation while you're jumping, or something like that. And so it's just an example, but the point is that the manual testers have trained. They have a brain. They can do creative exploratory testing, and I don't think you're ever going to get that with the machine. Your goal should be to get to what you might call continuous delivery, in the sense that at any point, with every change, at every point in the code line live, you're able to push the button and say, okay, we're going to ship this version. Or we can branch out, fix a bug, ship it to the App Store. You don't have to wait till the code base stabilizes and you go through a large testing phase. You're continuously testing, and you have such high confidence in the tests that you are willing to push the button and send it to the app stores to push it out to real users. If you can get there, you have an extreme degree of flexibility and agility. And I think to get there, you need to test on real devices, because in the end, your users are not running the iOS simulator. Although it'd be great to have 8 cores and 64 gigabytes of RAM. No, in the end, they have real devices. They buy a wide range of devices. They have different hardware capabilities, have different screen sizes, they have different OS versions, and run different platforms. And to capture all that in a simulated environment just isn't authentic enough. So if you want to get to the point where you can run your tests and have confidence that everything will work for your users in the environment it will be deployed, well, then you need to test on real hardware. So that's the kind of philosophy. So what is Xamarin Test Cloud? I included this picture from one of the labs because I thought it was really nice. But it's kind of several things. I'll tell you about each of them. So it's approximately 2,000 real non-jailbroken mobile devices that we've fully automated. So it's real hardware, it's not simulated, it's not modified in the sense that we do jailbreaks on iOS or similar. It's just like your users' devices. So we go out, buy them, we plug them into the system after a configuration phase. And then we are able to fully automate all the aspects of testing. Then we provide that hardware, so to speak, as a service. So you're able to run tests on those, and we host the execution of the tests. So you basically upload everything to us. We scale out so that we run the test in parallel on a number of devices. We gather a bunch of information and aggregate that into a test report that you can go look at, or you can integrate in your CI system. Of course, in order to do that, you need a technology to write the automated tests, and we have several options for you there. A new thing that's coming up is actually support also for manual testing. We can talk briefly about that in a minute. And all of this is built kind of with continuous integration in mind, so you can integrate it in TeamCity or Jenkins or whatever you're using to have it run automatically, say with every commit, or nightly, as in the case of eBay. So that's what the service that I'm working on and Rasmus is working on, that's what that does, which is over here. I wish we could go there now. I want to stress that what I'm talking about here is specifically it's automated UI testing. It's not unit testing or integration testing at the moment. That's not something we support currently. And I think you get where you get the most value out of real devices is actually building your entire application, installing your entire application as you would if you were to ship it on the App Store, and then doing an UI test, which is simulating what the user would do with the application. Clicking buttons or tapping buttons, swiping, rotating, and so on. So that's what automated UI testing means, in case you haven't heard of it before. So think of it as simulating a user using an application, but it's a program that does it, so it's fully automated. So you can do things like scrolling and swiping, entering text. You could also do some interesting things which are hard to do manually, which is simulate the GPS location of the device. So we had kind of an interesting case where if you wanted to test how the application behaved if you were at the Tower at London, well then doing that manually requires buying a plane ticket and getting on the plane and bringing your device to London or calling someone there. But this is just one line of code. So automated UI testing has some capabilities that are really hard to do manually. Of course, it's also constrained by what you can program, so it doesn't have this creative, exploratory mindset that you can get with a manual tester. Anyway, so what you can do, you can interact with UI controls. You can query the state of the view. so the currently active screen. You can ask it, what buttons are you seeing? Is this text present? Is this image here? You can wait for events to occur, something that's really important. Say, I want to touch this button once it appears. You can also wait for things to disappear. For instance, wait for this network indicator spinner to disappear. That's all things you need to do to script an automated test. You can generate screenshots, and you can have some APIs to control the app lifecycle, like installing and uninstalling apps, launching and stopping the application. Some of the tools that we support also kind of allow some things that the user also can't do, a real user also can't do, which is actually calling methods on objects inside your application. I don't know of any users that can reflectively call methods on my objects, but basically the testing tool is integrated in the app, and there is a way to grab an object and query extract data from it, for instance. That can sometimes be handy, although it's an advanced technique. Here's a kind of small snippet of code in C#. Rasmus will show you more of this. But the basic API is pretty simple. So app.tab hello finds the text hello and performs a tap gesture on it. You can also, there's this small kind of query language, which is wait for the element E, which has the text inc or the IDE history button. So there's a small kind of declarative API to identify views on the screen. It does more. You can search the view hierarchy or talk about siblings or parents and so on. It's quite expressive. And then app.screenshot is another example. So there are several tools available to you if you're gonna run tests in Xamarin Test Cloud. I want to stress, by the way, that with these tools and with Xamarin Test Cloud, you can test any app. It doesn't have to be built in Xamarin. It's anything, whether it's built in PhoneGap or Objective-C in Java, it doesn't matter. As long as you have a compiled app, you can run it on the real devices, and we can perform this testing. So that's a common misunderstanding. So we have our own tools called Xamarin UI tests. Basically, you write tests in C#. You run them with NUnit or SpecFlow. How many are familiar with SpecFlow? Okay, so you know what that is. It's kind of BDD tool for C#. Yeah, and you run the test from inside your IDE, Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio, or from the command line, depending on what you prefer. And then there's Calabash, a tool that I've helped create, which enables you to write tests in Ruby and use Cucumber, which is a BDD tool. Again, if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it. If you are, then it's nice to know that Calabash is an option for you to run mobile tests and use Cucumber to execute them. There's also a new tool, which is called Appium, which is based on the Selenium WebDriver API, if you're familiar with that from other testing jobs. And that's more flexible in the sense that you can write the tests in almost every language. In my opinion, it has not as nice an API, but it's more general and it's more pure. That's also supported. And then we have Live, which is a new product that we're kind of working on at the moment, which is basically manual testing, but on remote devices. So you can get a session with the device we host, and you can control it from a browser at the moment. So that gives you the full library of devices, but without having to necessarily write tests. That's a private thing for now. There's not open access to it, but if one of you is interested in it, come talk to me and maybe we can figure out a beta or something. All right, so just briefly, I want to make sure you understand the execution model in Test Cloud before I hand it over to Rasmus. Let me just check time. Yeah. So basically, imagine you're writing your tests in Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio, and you run them locally. By the way, it's free to use these tools. All the Calabash and Xamarin UI test and Appium, you can use them, run them locally on your own devices or on simulators. And once you're happy with the test you developed, then you can choose to use Xamarin Test Cloud. And the way you do that is you upload it. And Rasmus will show you one of those right-click options from inside Visual Studio that maybe you've never seen it before, to upload to Test Cloud. And that goes on to a scheduling component, because we want to ensure that obviously only one customer can access a device at any given time, because otherwise we would get some really interesting results. So the customers do share devices, but they're wiped and cleaned between every test run from different customers. So we have some scheduling going on, and then usually request running on, say, 10 different devices, and that execution potentially goes on in parallel. So you get to run on Android 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, on a Samsung, on a Sony, and so on, and that kind of happens in parallel, and we aggregate the results. But that execution, importantly, happens on our servers, so you don't have to program the parallelization and aggregation of the result. We do that for you. You just upload everything, we run it. So that goes on the real devices. We detect crashes, so if your application crashes, we detect that and we get stack traces. We do symbolication on iOS. If you've done that, if you've done iOS development, you know what that means. But it's basically generating a stack trace on iOS. And then all of that information together with some performance information about CPU and memory usage is aggregated into a test report. And I'll show you, or Rasmus will show you what one of those test reports look like and how to program this. So I hope, it's a fairly quick presentation. I hope that gives you a basic overview. I think it'll be way more clear when you see it from Rasmus. So he's going to go on to a demo. And we can do questions at the end.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. So I don't have any slides, but I hope you're okay with code. So I'm going to start off here in Xamarin Studio, and I'm going to show you an iOS test. I hope everyone can read the code. So what I have here is just a basic, I've created a new project in Xamarin Studio, and when you create one of these projects, the template actually includes a set of UI tests. So you can see up here we have the app project itself, and then we have a UI test project down here below. And the file that I've opened up here is the basic test that it comes with. So it has a basic test where it'll open up. This is a master detail app, and it'll have some logic for whatever the template contains. So usually these templates don't contain that much, so the tests are rather simple. So installing UI test is really simple. If you want to do it for your own project, it's basically just a NuGet package. You just grab it and use it. It doesn't depend on NUnit, but the execution in Xamarin Test Cloud requires NUnit. So if you want, you can write them in the test frameworks, but it works best, or it's mostly tested with NUnit, and that's what Test Cloud supports. So the test that we have here, so we have a test fixture. This is just basic NUnit, and then we have different app classes which represent. They're kind of like the gateway into everything that you can do with the app. So being C# developers, we love our tools, we love our IntelliSense. So we wanted to make it really easy for you to find everything that you can do with your app. So if you do app and then dot, you'll get the normal IntelliSense, and you can see that you can do all kinds. Here's the invoke method that Karl was talking about before for actually calling methods inside the app. So if you want, for instance, want to do something that can't be done through the UI, you can create a method that might put your app in a different state that you want. All right. So the resolution is a bit bad here, but you can see the first thing. So basically what we're doing to get the app instance, you call this static class called configure app. Then you give it a platform, so you can give it Android or iOS. And then you can configure a bunch of stuff. You can configure if you want to run on an installed app, or you want to run on an app bundle for simulators. And obviously you can also do this for Android, and you can use APK files. In this case, we're using one of our new features, which is IDE integration with Xamarin Studio. So if we haven't specified, usually you would specify an app bundle here, and you would tell it where to find your app, so it could launch it on the simulator. But from Xamarin Studio, we can just tell Xamarin Studio to launch it, and then it should work. So for this basic test, we have a query. So I'm going to go into the detail of writing a test after this, because we know we all want to see Visual Studio instead, but for now we'll deal with the iOS test here in Xamarin Studio. So we're calling a query method to basically tell me something about the UI of my app, and we're looking for something marked. So marked is a shorthand for, there's also some documentation there that I'll tell you, that for Android it's anything that matches an ID, a content description, or a text. So if you have a button that shows some text, then you can use marked or text. So we're getting some app results back with information about the UI elements that it found. And for this particular test, it's actually because the view on an iPad is different. It might be difficult to read the comment, but this master detail app actually shows a different UI when it starts up as on an iPad. So it has an if statement, and then I'll tab to return to the master view. Then it taps a button with the ID add button, and then it waits for an element with this statement with the class UI table view to appear on the screen, and then it takes a screenshot. The screenshots locally don't do anything. They can if you ask it to, because it takes some time to actually take a screenshot. So if you actually want the images, you can enable local screenshots. But usually when you're developing, you have the device right next to you, and you can actually see what's going on the screen. So you don't want to spend a couple of seconds several times in your test waiting for screenshots to be taken. So let's try and run this test. And it's actually configured here. You can see, I don't think I can change the font here, but you can actually see that we've configured it to use this app that we have in our solution. So let's try and run it. Hopefully we'll have more luck with the simulator. And I can see there's a simulator popping up here. And obviously this is just a basic master view. So it's clicking the button and it doesn't really do anything because it's just a template app. So we'll go into a bit more, or a more advanced app in a second. So let's get to testing. I'll just shut this down again. So a test passed. So now we're ready. We've developed our tests and we want to run them in Test Cloud. So we can use the Run in Test Cloud option. It'll open up and it's telling me actually that it can't because I need to build it for devices. On iOS we have app bundles and IPA files, and to run in Test Cloud on real devices we can't use an app bundle. So we just need to configure it to use an actual device. So now, depending on the network, we should see it start uploading to Test Cloud. Seems to work okay. So this is Test Cloud. So we have, I have multiple teams on my account. So I'll just take this one. And then we have the device selector. So this is actually where I can, and all these are, as Karl said, all these are real devices. So I can actually go in here and say I want to run on exactly an iPad mini 3, or I want to run on an iPhone 4S running iOS 8.2. And you can see, and you can also use like a different, if you want to find a specific device, you can use the. So let's take an iPad as well because the view was different. So if we just go with these four. And then the next thing you will see is that we have parallelization options, which is actually that we can, obviously we are running the tests on multiple devices, but we can actually go further than that. We can actually, because we have so many devices, many of them we have more than one. So we can actually take your NUnit test suite and we can split it up by test method or test fixture, and we can run. So if you have 300 tests, we can run them on 5 phones maybe, or there's one of the phones that we actually have 100 of. So we could run them really fast, faster than you could locally. So let's say done. And obviously this IDE upload takes you through this wizard every time. But if you want to do it from your CI system, you can go up here and get the same, get a new test run where you can select a device set, and then you get a command line thing that you can put into your CI system and then upload through there. So now you can see that our test has been uploaded and it's validating right now. It'll start running in a second. Because we don't have that much time, I think I'll just go into a test run that I did earlier today. So I can show you the the test report. So you can see that I ran on 76 devices, 8 OS versions, and then it passed on everything, which is to be expected. And here you can see all the different phones and the results. So you can actually, you saw the app before, what it looked like on a phone. It looked like this. And on an iPad, it actually opens up and it'll open the master display view on the side, because the default is the. Yep. So that's the test report. I'll get back to this a bit once we've seen the other app. So let's switch to Visual Studio and we'll try and build a test with a more advanced app. So in this case, I'm actually using the .apk file. I've actually already built a binary file, and now we're going to do some black box testing. We don't have access to the source for this app right now. I have a device with me here, because the simulators can't run on the virtual machine. So my performance is also, because I'm running, like Mike was, running a virtual machine inside my Mac. It's a bit slower. So here I have, it's basically the same thing as before. I have configure app, Android, APK file, and then start app. It'll give me the instance once it's ready. Let's try and run that. That's not what I expected. So what's happening here is that it's just launching the app, because we haven't specified any test yet, right? So what we'll do once it gets back is that we will, maybe I'll just restart it. So what we'll do is that we will go in here through the app class, and then the thing that so here it launched it's one of our sample apps. It's a mobile CRM. For this demo, usually it comes with like an Azure data services layer, but for the demo, I've torn that out and replaced it with something local, because internet and demos usually don't go too well together. So what we could do now is that we could start writing our test here. We could start tapping some buttons or querying to figure out what's going on, and then we could relaunch. But it takes a couple of seconds to launch the APK. It needs to be installed, if it's changed, everything. It takes a while, so the feedback loop isn't as fast. So one of the things that we got from Calabash, actually, because they use a console a lot more than us, is this idea of a REPL. So a REPL is a read eval print loop, which is basically just a program that understands C#, and you can write expressions, and it'll give you the answers. So we have an app.REPL method here, and you can think of it kind of like a breakpoint. So once UI test hits this line, it'll stop the test, and it'll pop up our REPL, and then you can interact with the app in a more continuous way, instead of having to. Now I'm curious to see how big this window will be. It'll be big. Let's resize it a bit. Let's see if it breaks anything. Okay, so don't be scared by the console look. It's actually fairly advanced. So yeah. So you actually have you actually have IntelliSense, so you can tap complete and stuff. It doesn't really like to be this. Okay, so to figure out what our app looks like, we can start querying into so we could do app.query and then start using the query language that Karl was talking about before. But since we're in the REPL and we hear a lot, we've implemented a tree method that will actually give you the view tree, so it's easy for you to find what you want to interact with. In this case, I know that this home button up here is actually, it has the ID home. You can see it here in the tree. So we're just going to tap home. And then obviously we can inspect again, and now the view tree is a lot longer, because it'll only show you what's visible on the screen. And for this, we can just use the text, so accounts. What we want to do is we want to go into one of our accounts and then create a new order. what you can also see is that UI test is printing out where it tapped and the query that it used to find them. So if you don't specify a query, it'll just use the marked because it's so common. It's what you use all the time. So it just made more sense to not having to. So you only go into the lambda mode with the query language if you want to do something advanced. So let's do something advanced. So for instance, on this, we would like to click on the first one, the Bay Unified School District. And I know, or we know that it has a property called, it has a text property, right? Because it's a view element. And then we can use contains Bay. So we'll click on the first element that matches this query. And there's a lot of options for this. You can also, it should open here. Then we'll go into the orders to place a new one. You can see that we're actually running out of time soon. Oh, we started late? Oh, okay, cool. Right, so we'll tap on a new order. Let's get to the order where there's. So now we're creating a new order, and then you can see here that we have three text fields, paper, or we have these three, and we want to tap them, but we don't really, we actually want to enter a price because we want to place the order. So if we go into the tree mode, we can see here that we have price, but there's not really any good controls that we can interact with. And they don't have IDs. The developers, for some reason, didn't add them, so we're kind of stuck. But the query language also has, maybe actually we'll start with this. So we actually have a flash method that will highlight stuff on the screen. So let's just, and we actually have a query language for text fields because it's so common. So we'll just ask it to highlight all the text fields, and now you should see them flashing on the other side. So you can see that they're actually. So it can give you an idea to highlight. If the view tree is very complicated, you can highlight different parts. And you can see that the method also gave you the results that we got from our, if we had done a query, we would get the same information. You can see here there's, it's an Android widget edit text class with a width and a height and everything. This is what you can see. But this doesn't really help us. So what we'll actually do is we will reference it by index. So we can say we want this is zero based, so we want the second text field, and we want to write 100. Oops. Oh, not tab. Let's do enter text. Should be better. So it's actually clicking, and then we want to place the order, so we'll do that. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to go, now we've created the new order, then we will also want to complete one of the existing orders. So we'll just tap the first one, printer. And if it matches, you can see that UX has told you that it using the first element out of the 7 I found containing with the text printer. We'll just choose the first one. And then we'll enter text again in the first text field. And we'll just use what we just learned. So that UI test will use the first element that it finds. And since this is the first text field on this one, we'll just enter 1,000. And then it should work. And then we actually have to complete this, we actually have to draw a signature with this signature pad component. But we can't really do that. Not easily from the REPL anyway. We could do it, but it would take a while. But to actually be able to see the signature field, let's just go tap the back button on the device. And then this is where we stop with the REPL. So one of the things that you can see here, if we write help again, we also have a copy command. So the session that I just wrote, everything I wrote, I can copy to the clipboard. And then I will close the REPL down. And then we will paste it here. So, and then let's just remove this flash method, right? Because, and then since this is a demo, let's just go and grab, I have the full test here somewhere. So let's just go grab some code I wrote to show you that you can actually draw a signature. So this is basically just coordinates, right? I'm just dragging across the screen. I'm finding the size of the signature pad and I'm drawing on it. So let's see. So this is the test that I just wrote with the Rebel. So let's try and run it and see. Hopefully it works. Hope I didn't miss anything. But since it was driven by my interactions, I'm pretty certain then that it will do what it's supposed to do. So now we're actually in the signature pad, and we will draw an X. So yeah, that's the test in, and obviously the IDE integration you saw before is also here. You can also upload to Test Cloud from Visual Studio. And I have a test run that I did with the mobile CRM. It's a fairly old test run, but and I actually ran it on like a bunch of devices, and there was a lot of problems with this app actually. I don't know if you can see in the overview. I ran it on 151 devices. It took 237 minutes to run it.
Device minutes.
Device minutes. Yeah. It's not.
It's not a wait time of 231, but it means the sum, if you sum together how long it took on every device, that's 230. So because it's parallel, it's faster.
So around 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Device.
And you can see it actually ran on quite a few, and you can see how different it is on some of them. This, for instance, once it launches, the chart is much wider, and some of the failures actually. If we just leave this one. Yeah, so this one actually failed to open the menu. We have some of the ones where the menu looks exceptionally huge. So if you were trying to click something further down, it would look horrible on this device, or it wouldn't work because the test framework wouldn't be able to see it. We have some where it failed to complete the order simply because the last form that I showed you it's too tall for they actually forgot to include a scroll view on the sample. So you can't actually, let me find one of the devices that failed. So on this device, for instance, you can't actually scroll down because it's not a scroll view. You can't go down to the place order or complete order button on this device. And some of them you can't even sign because you can't see the signature pad. So, yep, I think that's it for my demo. Let's go back to the slideshow.
All right, I don't think we have, yeah.
You can take some questions.
Exactly, I think that's pretty much all we have. I'll give out some references if you want to check out more, but otherwise we'll take questions.
Yeah. How do you handle external dependencies, like if you're calling a web service or something?
You can still call web services.
It's up to you really as an app developer. We just provide an infrastructure and a test framework for simulating user behavior and devices and parallelization, execution infrastructure. The app that you build and ship to us, up to you. If you want to stop out the web service call, you can do that. If you want to call the real production web service, you can call that.
Yep.
Is it possible to define the query time, or how long time it takes before the query is completed or entered?
Yes. All the gestures I showed you, they will wait for a different or for a given time. I think it's 15 seconds. But you can also do wait for and then specify your own date time. Yep.
What if I want to use the camera on the phone, call my uncle in Africa or something like that?
Yeah. It's limited to your application with some of the test frameworks. Other test frameworks have more access, so it's kind of depending on which test framework you use. Kind of the default answer is you stay within your application, but we do have some tricks we can play. For instance, usually you don't actually want to test the real camera, but you want to test how your app responds once that camera comes back with a response. And we have a technique called intent mocking on Android, which will enable you to do that. So you can say, make sure the camera returns with this response, and then click the take picture button, and then you can test how your app responds. So we can mock it out. Yeah. Right. More questions? We are also happy to answer more questions afterwards and do more demos and talk kind of one-on-one on groups if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have some links if you want to read more, and there's particularly one I want to recommend, the first link here, because it's a talk Rasmus and I did together, a full kind of 1.5 hour version of this. But actually the fun part is that in the last 20 minutes or so, we actually did a live streaming from the device labs. So we had a guy in the device lab, and Rasmus submitted a test, and he'd written an app that could that would kind of wait, launch the app and wait, and then we dialed him up on FaceTime, and he walked around in the lab so people could see that app running and the test running on all those devices.
And I could control all the apps from a web dashboard. So I had a web app where I could make them say sounds or play sounds and play a song as well.
Fun real-time
So
experience.
we had 200 devices in sync playing music.
Yeah.
So
you can watch that video towards the end. We do that fun thing if you want to see what the lab kind of looked like at that time. All right, I think that's it. Maybe it's time for a break.